Okay, I'll start at birth.
Yes.
So born at Alexandra Township in
Yeah.
1982.
Okay.
So anybody who knows Alex, I was born second, as they always say, second as second, you know. Yeah, I think in a two-room house with all my I guess cousins, you know, because at that stage it was just myself, my parents firstborn, but a lot of my cousins stayed with us because their parents were also working in other parts, etc. We then moved to Diepkloof quite early, so I think still in my toddlerish years, moved to Diepkloof. And so I would say pre-teen years, spent that in Soweto. And then my parents divorced. When they divorced, we moved to the East Rand, myself, my sister, and my mother. And from teenage years all the way to adulthood, we were in Spruitview in the East Rand. So I'm from Gauteng. That's probably the best way to say it. Big townships, well-known townships. I think a Joburger through and through. And then left home for the first time to go to Rhodes at the age of 16.
Okay.
And Grahamstown
was
like
isn't 16 a bit too early?
Yeah, I was 16 in matric. So
no, what happened?
I actually think maybe because my dad was a teacher, I don't know. And we lived near a school in Diepkloof. That's where I started my schooling as a 4-year-old. So I started very early.
Oh, wow.
And finished early.
Wow.
Yeah. And
I have a
so
5-year-old.
Starts, actually, yeah.
I have a 5-year-old, but you know, like I can't imagine him there, like already at at 4. Okay.
Yeah. No, you're right. Actually, when I became a parent, I would also look at my daughter. I was like, that's when I think I had more empathy for myself. Like, oh, I was actually so young, you know, going through so many things. So got to
so this early start helped you in some way, I guess.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think so, because I guess where I've been blessed, fortunate, is to maintain the early starts, you know. So I would say that's characterized my life, that has characterized my career, you know, to the point where then after Rhodes, I started at Unilever as the youngest graduate at that time, as 19 years old, joining Unilever as a graduate. When some people were only maybe going to their first year of varsity. So I think early starts have characterized my life, as I say, and I would say my career. So 21 years this year in HR, about 7 years initially in FMCG, and then the next 7 years in the finance regulatory space, so a bit of the JSE and the National Treasury. I always say two sides of the same coin, actually. That's really how corporate SA is run from a monetary point of view, the finance, the purse of the country. When you look at it from I suppose a corporate private sector, JSE regulatory space, and then the other side, which is the National Treasury that runs the economy. So those 7 years combined, I think, also quite special. And then 5 years at Heineken. Which included a stint in the Netherlands, and then most recently my life here at Vodacom. So yes, I've lived many lives, as you said before we started recording, and I think exciting lives, and reaching lots of exciting milestones throughout.
Wow. Now, so with all these many milestones, you won the 2022 HR of the Year, I think last year, which is big on its own. So when you just look back in these leadership roles you've held over the years, I love the recognition of the early start. What are some of the things that you found to work for you? Some of the leadership lessons, 2, 3, 4, to say, these have kind of served me over the years. Whenever I do this, I think things, work out for me.
Yeah. I think the one which always sounds cheesy, but it's the be yourself, because that's the best person that you can be, you know. And I think all of us, of course, when we come in, we ask, okay, how do I become successful? What is the script? Maybe we try to be like other people, but certainly as I've become more confident with myself, as I've come to know myself better, the best one and the first one for me is be yourself. So if I were to give people, I suppose, just a nugget, it's really spend as much time as possible getting to know yourself, befriending yourself. What am I good at? What am I not good at? And how do I compensate for the things I'm not good at? So, you know, is it through a team? Is it through a support network? So for me, that's been one of the things which I think has definitely come through over the years. Yeah.
So they will come to the other ones, but I want to go in here. Like, practically, what are do I do assessments? Do I do, I don't know, do I ask people? How do I do this? How do I spend more time knowing myself?
Yeah, certainly. I suppose as an HR practitioner and with the influence of industrial psychology, I'm definitely going to mention assessments. I do believe in that. And assessments have levels to them. You know, it is, I mean, most recently, I've just done 2 actually in the last 2 weeks. And one was an Enneagram, one was a Deloitte tool around, I think they call it a business chemistry assessment. Are you a driver, a pioneer? There's all sorts, you know, there's Myers-Briggs, etc. But for me, the more time you can invest in getting to know yourself, and assessments help because it's a level deeper in terms of really framing or maybe helping to shape, you know, what are your strengths? And what makes you tick. But I think also just learning your own patterns, you know, when have I been frustrated? When did I feel bored? What really excited me, energized? And I think one which, Manda, not enough people talk about, because I think sometimes we shame people for emotions, particularly women. But for me, your emotions tell you a lot about yourself. And what I mean by that is, and I often say it is emotions in and of themselves are not a problem. They're not an issue. But for me, it's, of course, any extreme emotion can be unhealthy. But for me, is what is this emotion telling me? So if I'm getting frustrated, if I'm getting annoyed, if I'm getting impatient, if I'm getting excited, what's behind that emotion? And that's what you need to understand for yourself, because maybe it's a reaction because I'm getting an allergic reaction because I actually disagree with this from an ethics point of view, or because this makes me upset. And when you spend the time to understand them, that's the real message around what drives you, what excites you, what you stand for. And I think we should explore those things because they tell us a lot about who we are.
So I don't want to generalize, but I think some of us, at least me, you know, you kind of grow up and you learn very quickly to kind of shove emotions away and to kind of just stay, you know, when you're upset, you hide it. When, you know, some boys can cry, you know, like those, how do you bring them back?
Well, I don't have the full, I don't know, maybe technical expertise on how to bring them back. I think one way though, which, and I'm always so excited when I see people embrace it, is vulnerability. That's one way, because and one is role modeling vulnerability. I think leaders who put themselves at the center and they say, yeah, guys, I also struggle with this, or I also find this particularly difficult, or I'm so frustrated, or I think that vulnerability, because sometimes there's this perception that leaders have all the answers, or
and you have to have it all together.
Strong.
Yes. So then that's how you learn to not pay attention to emotions, because whatever bubbles up, you know, you're gonna stand tall and
right. But I think by having that vulnerability, that's one way of bringing them back. I've seen when people see leaders that are vulnerable, and vulnerable doesn't mean weak, but I think it's being open and being able to say, even if when you're saying, guys, we have to charge forward and we must find the solution, but I don't know what the solution is and how we're going to find it.
I'm a bit scared as well.
And I'm a bit scared. Yeah, I think it does bring a bit of, you know, that openness to say, I can actually also share my feelings.
Okay. And then you said something here, and I wonder if this involves journaling or something, like, you know, reflecting on, hey, I was frustrated, Why was that? What were the triggers? Do you advocate for journaling, or how else do people sort of do this thing of reflecting on their emotions and triggers and patterns, if it were?
Yeah, again, I think because, you know, different people respond differently. Journaling is certainly one because I know I'm one of those people who also learn by writing. I write a lot of notes. I don't always necessarily go back and read them, but that act of writing in itself is a learning, one of my learning ways. And journaling is one, but sometimes for other people it's talking. So do you have an accountability partner? Some people have official coaches or mentors, but it can even just be your partner at home or a friend. But I think reflecting is so important, and quite often we move on from one thing to the next thing without really trying to understand the pattern. Why do I see this? Because once you get to a certain level of confidence or understanding, because self-awareness is a game changer, is you then spot the triggers and you can spot the patterns ahead of time, and you can manage yourself. And, you know, if you know, I don't know, I'm not structured, so how am I gonna bring in a colleague, a team member who's gonna help me with the structure? Or I'm really super structured and I don't wanna stay in my little bubble. I need someone to be creative and challenge me. So you can then help yourself along the way.
Stunning. Love that. That was just one.
Yeah, and that was this one.
Know thyself, befriend thyself. There was a second one.
And I think maybe in the first one I touched a bit on the second one, because for me the second one is about so on the first one of knowing yourself, it helps you with the second one, which is for me to build your support structure.
Sure.
And again, very broad what support structure could mean. If you are blessed or lucky or senior enough to be in a senior role, it can mean an actual team where you can delegate and empower people. And it's such a powerful one, because then it's that consciousness and the awareness that I deliver through others. And so how do I make sure those others are people who can cover me and actually be an extension of myself, and actually also compensate for those things that I know about myself where I need that. But also support structure again means different things. As I say, not everyone has a large team, not everyone has someone to delegate to, but do you have an accountability partner? Do you belong in some type of community or you know, and community could also just be a network and people to deliberately make sure that you're creating a network and support for yourself. There's really hardly anybody, if anyone at all, who succeeds by themselves. Even if you have the mental agility, the propensity to win, or the aptitude, all these fancy terms, your latent potential, but you actually only realize it through a system. And that system could be anything, whether it's writing notes and reviewing them like you were suggesting with journaling, or physical people, or actual resources where you can research, where you can find out. But I think that's for me been one of the big things for me, which I think has helped me a lot.
Wow. And what I like about this is there's intentionality, because there might be people around, there might be systems around, but once you know yourself, how do you intentionally kind of bring those to help you succeed? Lovely. Maybe we can touch on the third one, and then we can get into HR and all the exciting.
Sure. I think I would say continuous learning. So I've always been curious. I was a curious child. I'm still very curious. I remember actually talking to one of my colleagues recently when this whole there's a ChatGPT thing and this whole obsession with AI. I was like, I like, and now I had FOMO, but this was a few months ago. Like I read up and you know, and she was saying to me, no, for me, you can't keep up with everything in the world, Njabulo, and I just deliberately close off to certain things. Focus, you know, and I respect that. And I was like, go for your focus. For me, I've always just been curious, and I think continuous learning. And of course, there's moments to focus, because you must also then execute and deliver and whatever. I think though, but just continuous learning, I think it keeps you relevant, it keeps you fresh. And I think yeah, the world changes all the time, and it's about just understanding what's happening around you. Yeah, I think that would be my last one.
So practically you, and I hope you share, but you have studied quite a bit. You didn't just do your first degree, right? You want to just unpack that, so that's one way to continue to learn, and maybe other ways as well at a practical level.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose formal learning, yes. I've been passionate about formal studies as well. So studied a Bachelor of Arts degree at Rhodes University. So did my undergrad majoring in industrial psychology. That's how I guess I came across the HR path and even got to know about it. And in later years, almost 10 years into my career, I did an MBA with Gibbs.
Of course, you have to do it at Gibbs.
Of course.
Sorry,
yeah.
I mean, those who don't know me, I'm a lecturer at Gibbs, so
really? Oh, cool.
I'm
Nice.
biased. I'm biased. Yeah.
You're biased. Yeah. So I'm a big Gibbs fan myself, and yes, so
Good.
I did my MBA 2011-12 with Gibbs. And then when I was with Heineken in my early days, they also got to do a program at INSEAD, targeted at hypos, and it's also a general management type of a program for executives with a slant, of course, towards the challenges which that particular industry had or has. And how to stay relevant. And then recently, actually, soon after I joined Vodacom, I'm not sure why, because when you're joining a new organization, you're very busy, but I still found time. Or maybe the curiosity to do design thinking program also with INSEAD. So formally, that's what I've done. And I think to the point that I've just made, it was just genuinely like, everyone is talking about this iteration world. Yes. People are talking agile, etc. What does it really mean? And can you even have design thinking in an HR context and etc. That's what drove me towards doing that. And I think to then the second part of your question, which is other ways to learn, it's not always about certificates and about, in fact, one of the things that I say a lot, I think to my team's irritation, is learning and development should not be about an obsession of ticking boxes and a shopping list of courses. For me, real development, real capability is in the practical as well. Sometimes it is appropriate to do a classroom intervention, and sometimes it's about shadowing. Maybe if I shadow Manda, then I know how to go about creating my own podcast and how to go about doing that. Sometimes it's mentoring and coaching. Sometimes it's on the job learning. So there's various forms of learning. I think it's about just the confidence and the curiosity to put up your hand, to ask questions, and that's how you learn. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, so again, intentionality around, okay, I've got the classroom stuff. Maybe this year I can't study for whatever reasons, but hey, how do I use all the other modes of learning? So, absolutely. You're in an industry that's evolving, I think, largely from like telco to, I think the new terms now are techco. And there's AI, and then machines are going to take our jobs and all these things. How do you see the role of HR in sort of shifting the ways of work, culture, being relevant, empowering people in this ever-evolving space?
Yeah, I think there's never been a more exciting time to be in HR. And I think honestly, I think HR gets to be at the forefront and to lead. And I like that you mentioned culture, because that's definitely a part of it. I think when with this transition to being this technology communications company, the culture also needs to shift, right? You can't take forever to make decisions. So how do you become more agile? How do we, which means then also understanding what is the holdup with making decisions? Is it the hierarchy? If it's the hierarchy, how do we become more empowering? How do we have a culture that actually encourages people to experiment, to learn, to try things? you want a culture of innovation. So it then comes back also into that employee life cycle of making sure that you're attracting the right skills from a talent point of view, digital and technology skills. And if you want to attract the best of the best, you have to have a conducive environment for them. I always say, talent vote with their feet. Everyone is talking about the war of talent. Like, the talent is gone. They voted. You're still fighting each other saying who's winning. The talent has won. And they voted with their feet. And so the power dynamics have changed. It's no longer about corporates have all the power, the company, the talent has the power. And so with all of that in mind is making yourself, yes, attractive. It's co-creating the culture with the talent. For me, that's been one of the exciting things, actually. It's not going to be about myself or the CEO saying these are the leadership standards and that's all there is, but it's actually getting the talent to actually firstly have a reflection. What is the gap? If we're saying we're this and we want to be that, okay, do we have a clear picture of what this other state is? Because that clarity then really shows us the gap to say, how far are we from that? And that's the journey. And that strategy in short, right? For everybody, it's always like, if you are clear about this, then this is the strategy story about how I get there. And for us, it's been, I think it's both skills, of course, because you're talking about technology, digital skills, having more segmented propositions. You can't just have one EVP, hashtag further together. What does it mean for someone in software engineering? What does it mean for someone who wants to be a top cloud person in the country? Do they see us even as a technology destination home, or do they think it's only at Google and Amazon? And these are all the things that we constantly have to work through. So definitely the co-creation is key, because that's the talent telling you what talent wants. I think it's about also being very, I would say, flexible, but because it's an organization, you have to have structure, but flexible in the sense of experimentation, because I think it's being open to practices, seeing how it lands and it doesn't land. And I think that's quite different from the old school of like, this is the HR policy section 3.2 says this, and that's it. And then you go talk to HR if you don't like it, People don't come to HR, they leave. And then you say, why are you leaving? And then like, it's that 0.3 of yours over there,
And they hardly ever mention that, right? They'll be like, I found something better, or I found a challenging role. And they always find some nicer reasons to want to move.
Absolutely.
Sure. So I like how we're going in the practical sense. So normally companies will have, hey, you need to have an employee value proposition. And now you're saying we need to have segmented employee value propositions that support, I guess, the overall picture.
Yeah. So, we definitely still have an overall EVP. I think very strong and credible one. And I think one that really is anchored in a powerful master brand. If you look at our corporate brand, I'm going to sound like a cheesy HR salesperson, but the truth is, I do think we live purpose. People talk about purpose, but we live it. I think there's so many things that you can point to, whether it's Code Like a Girl, the community work, switching on farmers, where you can now, water your millies from an app or whatever, I think so I think that part is kind of obvious, but it's how do you anchor your employer brand on such a powerful corporate or master brand? So that work has been done, but the segmentation, which is what we're currently busy with, is the real work to say, what does it mean for women? Because we want to be the employer of choice for women. We're very clear about our agenda. We want to be able to attract tech and digital skills. Does it have to be different? Does it have to be more segmented in a different way to be attractive? And I think even within those segments, there's experienced hires, there's the youth as well, how do we make sure that for people who are new entrants into the workspace, that we are this employer that's attractive, etc. So quite a lot of work that's needed to be done there. I think the we're building on a good base where we've identified what are the 14 digital skills and capabilities that we'll need in the future. All the research has been done, all the benchmarks, World Economic Forum, etc. And now really playing with what does it actually now mean in real life when you want people to grow and to stay with you. Yeah.
So then, because sometimes you hear people say, yeah, there's shortage of talent or the skills that we are looking for to kind of win in this age. So how are you doing things differently as you onboard potential talent, if it were, and very quickly assimilated in the business to can go and change the world and do this purposeful work?
Yeah, I do think we're with everybody fishing in the same pond. There is a shortage, so I do think I suppose the term scarce and critical skills is very relevant. Which then, and then to your point about, so what are we doing differently, is it's a preparedness to grow your own timber. So we've been very clear on our reskilling agenda. We've had a program that's been running called #OneMoreSkill. So my earlier point around identifying what is this future that you're talking about, very clear on what we believe are the future capabilities, whether it's AI, cloud, cyber, etc. And the #OneMoreSkill campaign, which has now become quite well known even across our Vodafone family globally, is it's really been about the intention of the reskilling agenda, and over investing in our people to be able to make sure that they are able to turn and be able to acquire new capabilities. And how do we then translate that into career paths, translate that into one day, or I used to be an HR person, today I'm a cybersecurity specialist. I think a lot of organizations are going to have to do that. The reality, though, is not everybody can transition from a reskilling point of view. So it's also that, what's our level of capability today out of our population? Realistically, what's the percentage that can reskill? And then those who can't reskill, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to move into the future? And I think those are some of the things that we are having to look at. We're fortunate to have a very big organization, so we also have a talent mobility program. So how do we also, you've got some more mature markets, some are more startups. How do we send talent to help a startup so that they can try their skills, come back, and be promotable and things like that? So those are some of the things that are quite important. Yeah.
So I want to kind of feel like I'm inside Vodacom, and then there's like #OneMoreSkill. What happens to me? Like I'm busy, I don't know, doing my work. Am I incentivized to work? Do I get to learn something for free? What happens? What does this look like?
Yeah, so it looks like many things. Firstly, we have what we call Grow My Impact, which is our performance system. And it's in the name, Grow My Impact. So everybody's encouraged to say, how are you going to stretch yourself and grow your impact to be able to support the business strategy. And so as part of our performance system, there's the what and the how, and a big part of the how is this development piece. There's all sorts of learning. So there's official ones where through like courses and programs, people can access certification or any other programs that are related to our future capabilities that we've identified. And
then people are getting funded for free.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Everyone.
Yes, everyone.
Now I feel like I want to go work at Vodacom.
No, I'm telling you, I mean, we're very proud. I mean, for our investment, I mean, close to $500 million. We spend on our training and education. Super proud. Some of it with formal institutions such as Gibbs.
Good choice.
Yes, good choice. We work with other institutions as well, let me just say. Let me give some a shout out with Duke, the University of Free State, just before I'm called
Good
biased.
choices still.
So that's in the formal space, but we also have a lot of our own programs. We also have LinkedIn Learning through some other platforms. So quite for me, it's one of the things that I'm very proud of, to the level at which we invest. And so that's part of our investing in our people for the future.
And how do you reconcile the return on this investment? I imagine some companies, they have an intention to invest in their people, but when it comes to sign the check, then a business case is due, and nobody can do a proper NPV for these things. How do you think about this return on investment on learning?
It's funny. Yeah, we just had a leadership conference internally for the past 2 days, and the CFO, I was very happy to hear the CFO saying, that old joke about, when the accountant says, what if we invest in this person and they leave? And the HR person says, what if we invest in them and they stay? We don't invest in them and they stay, So it was great coming from her, because that means she's bought into it. So we take it quite seriously. I mean, for us, it's evident in the internal progression that we have in the organization. This particular leadership conference I'm referring to, we did an exercise where 40% of the room were all internal promotion. So all of those people, the question was, if you have not been in your role for a year, please stand up, and 40% of that room stood up. And for us, it talks to us being proud of our internal promotions. It's something that we quite deliberate about, showcasing that we want the majority of our leaders to be grown internally and not coming from outside. Not that there's anything wrong with people coming from outside. And we've just seen it also just in the performance of the organization, I mean, to the size of the group from a business revenue point of view, it talks to the quality of the level of the leadership and the people that we have. But it's certainly, to your point, it's not seen as a cost, it's seen as an investment. I don't know a lot of, I'm very proud to say that, I mean, I spent close to $500 million on just learning and development. It's a lot.
That's a big number.
And it's huge. It's not something that we dispute. It's a privilege and an investment that a lot of people get to enjoy. Yeah.
Sure. Wow. Okay. So I guess you will encourage other, leaders to do their bit to invest in their people.
Absolutely. Okay. I think corporates, we need to help also the country, and I think that's just the reality that we need to also own up to as a leadership team. Yeah.
Cool. So now let's talk about this culture piece. How do we practically change a culture of such a big organization? Let's say this is a stated end state that or desired end state. How do we turn the elephant towards where we want to end up, if it were?
Yeah.
Someone might be saying maybe they inherit either a small team and they kind of feel like the culture here is not great. Then what?
Yeah. I think I like the reference to the elephant, because elephant would be it feels overwhelming, right? Like and
it's got a lot of memory as well.
Exactly, a lot of memory. Exactly. I think firstly, it's always important to acknowledge that not everything in a culture is bad. I think for me, it's our legacy. Our culture is built on a firm and strong foundation, and there are many elements that we need to be proud of. And I think in any culture initiative that you make, even saying we're moving from telco to techco, being more technology, etc., it's about what do we do and do brilliantly, because we are an organization that's very successful. We've been successful in the past. We're currently successful, even in needing to transition to being more operational. It's technology oriented, and so that I think always gives confidence, because people know, okay, what are we doing really well today? And then I think for me, the co-creation is important, as I've mentioned, together with the business. And so you want to be able to say, okay, where do we trip ourselves up? And I think for me, when, as we spoke earlier about the vulnerability, I think when there is that role modeling to say, actually, we could be better at X, Y, Z. You know, are we happy with how we deal with customer queries? Are we responsive enough? Are we fast enough? I think when people don't feel like it's an attack, people will actually say, yeah, actually, we could do better. We do need to improve. So I think for me, it's very important to make everybody feel a part of the solution. I think it's important to have role models. And one of the things that we've started doing is we have change influencers. And it's business leaders. So it's not HR people. So they say, oh, that airy-fairy HR thing. It's business leaders, technology leaders, commercial leaders, leaders who are running the business day to day. One, because they know the business very well. Two, we want any change that happens in an organization to be anchored in the reality of the business, not a concept that's up in the cloud. And three, for the level of ownership, you know, and if people are part of creating that culture or that solution, they're going to own it. And so for me, that's part of it. And then the reality, to your point, it's an elephant, especially the bigger an organization is, it takes time, but you always have to have ways to measure and track your progress. So it's aligning it to what you already have. So we've got like what we call Spirit Beat, which is an engagement survey. Yeah, the Spirit Beat, yeah, you know, so
you got these fancy names across everything, don't you?
Yeah, so we have what we call our culture program globally is called Vodacom Spirit, which is really a Vodafone, I suppose, because the bigger global is Vodafone. And so we've got Vodafone Spirit, Vodacom Spirit, but the whole idea is any kind of transition has to be accompanied by behavior. And what we've done locally is then taken it a level further and done that exercise that I just spoke about, which is kind of like, is there anything that we need to change? And we're saying there's a lot that we do that's actually great, so we can continue with that. But where are we tripping ourselves up? Where could we be more responsive to our customers? Where could we simplify things? And how are we going to generate growth? Okay, so we need to then cut out the red tape. We need to do this. We need to do that. And I think for me that co-creation has helped a lot, because you also get there quicker, because all hands are on deck. But I think it's culture programs take years. And then, of course, the key part is recognition and reward. And it's not just the monetary side of reward, but actual recognition to say, you know, so some of our pillars that we have are like, you know, create the future, experiment and learn fast, getting things done together, earning customer loyalty. And what I always check with the team, because the easiest one is to say, Amanda, you're great, high five, we got this done together. But the other you have to look a bit closer, and I always say, no, guys, our table is not balanced. There's 4 legs. Are we creating? Are we experimenting? Let's reward that too, and let's look for that. And that's what I love about our program, because it's encouraging us to spot the right things and to catch people doing the right things. And I think that helps. Yeah.
Lovely. So two things I want to follow up on. One is on this experimentation, and I'm a big fan of this culture of experimentation. How will, if someone listening kind of say, how can I create that culture? Where normally, you know, we sit forever, deliberate, and then we have one big launch, and hardly ever sort of experimentation, fail, learn, the things you're doing with your design thinking. How do you practically do that or influence?
So I think one is making experimentation fashionable. So we have hackathons. And the hackathons are really a big deal. I mean, we've had some of our best innovations through hackathons, and it also creates nice internal competition across markets. I think the hackathons have become kind of the flag of innovation, but I think to your point, innovation always is not always the big hackathon that happens once or twice a year, but every day in my space, I can actually experiment and do something different. And that's where this piece that I just spoke about around the recognition, where we do monitor that have you actually given. So we've got what we call it a stars and a thank you. So a star has a monetary side to it. A thank you is just that, a thank you, but it's officially recorded. So you can say, oh, in this team, we've had 300 thank yous. And out of those 300, 20 were around creating the future and 10 were about getting things done together. So it's amplifying it and actually
who's doing the thank yous? And as you just say, hey, thanks, Njabulo, great podcast.
Yes, but we actually have to write it in the system so that it's recorded. So you send a thank you, and I see those flying through. So sometimes it will be someone in the business sending a thank you to one of my HR executives, and then automatically as the line manager, I'm copied in, and I'm like, oh, Michelle got a thank you. Oh, that's nice.
You have an inventory of thank yous.
Yes, we have an inventory of thank yous. Actually, we do. I never thought about it like that, but you can literally run a thank you report. And you can run a stars report.
What does that look like now?
And the stars, I then tell you which categories the person was thanked for. Yeah.
So what's the star? How does the star one look like? What's
the star is monetary. That's a difference. So the star is anything from 3,000 rands to 20,000 rands.
For what? I need some money. What do I do to get the
so it would be so again, it must be against one of the culture pillars. So if it's creating the future, you could be like, Manda was innovative because he has worked on a chatbot which can actually answer difficult questions and queries for HR when HR is not in the office. So that's definitely.
So I'm voting to give him a 5,000 star.
Yes, and then you get a 5,000 rand star or a 20,000 rand star, which if you
so my manager can just write and say, he interviewed Njabulo well. He deserves a 10,000 rand star because then
it's the manager's discretion, so they decide how.
So not only do you have a pool of money to do learning, you have a pool of money to drive culture.
Absolutely.
Is this pool similar size as the other one?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think what's the actual percentage, but it's a fraction of your team's, I suppose, payroll, for lack of a better word. So depending on the size of your team, you'll get a percentage allocated to you. But yes, absolutely.
Okay. So there's stars flying around the whole building.
Yeah, absolutely. They are.
Okay. So we spoke about that one. Now this doing things together. I forgot the exact words, but now people are working from home, and some are in the office and some are somewhere else. There's that one piece on how do we kind of get cohesion and doing things together in this sort of new world. The second part is the old question of diversity, inclusion, empowerment. How are we doing the things together in the context of these two?
Yeah. I think the first one, and I think for a lot of leaders, all of us, we've had to adjust. Sometimes half of the people are in the room, the other half are on the screen. And then when people came back, they would forget about the people in the screen because they're looking at the people in the room. So it's been kind of like a new set of skills to be able to work in this hybrid world. But to your question, I think specifically about getting it done together, working virtually has become a norm. And the getting it done together is just really about looking at the contribution and looking at people's outputs. So teams have found ways to be able to say, do we need to come in person and huddle in a room and actually do this together? Or some will be virtual to be able to solve for a problem. And I think there's even nice virtual ways now to actually even collaborate, right? Where you can have stickers in a conversation, whether it's Teams or whatever, and to make it much more interactive. I think the consciousness though is, or the work we've had to do to develop the consciousness in our leaders to say, recognize that as actually getting things done together. And removing silos, collaborating on finding solutions for a customer. That's getting it done together. And how do you reward that and call it out so that people can see it being modeled across the organization. But I think,
one quick follow-up here is, do you now have a policy that says people must come so many days a week to the office?
We work on a hybrid model. So our hybrid model is 2 to 3 days a week. And that's really up to teams and the leaders to manage, in short. So teams decide their own tempos. Is it Mondays and Fridays? Is it, or do they all take turns? And particularly for the leaders, how do you make sure you have face time with all of your team at some point, and how you determine that for yourself? But our model, we believe that there's definitely still value in the face time and the collaboration and the engagement. So, for example, town halls, we've started to say, can town halls be in person? Because it's such a networking opportunity and for people to really engage. But other sessions can be virtual. So yeah, the hybrid model seems to be working for us. And I think now the various teams have found a rhythm around what makes sense for them.
Lovely. Okay, no, we'll continue. Let's get it done together. Still on the virtual, as well as diversity, empowerment, plugging in the society and all the difficult questions that comes with that question.
Yeah, I think for me, the big one is moving from compliance and to just real inclusion, it's a passion point and sometimes a frustration of mine to say, we still need to, and I'm fine to continue. I get frustrated, but I think I'm still fine to educate people what I think inclusion really means. And I think for me, inclusion is so broad because, I think in a society like South Africa, which is racially charged, we can make it so easily about race and black and white. And then gender has become an issue. And I think that's fine from a demographics point of view. So certainly we know our history in South Africa. And of course, you do need the inclusion, and from a demographics point of view, I think though the true power of inclusion at the end of the day is about belonging. So how does Njabulo bring her best self to work? She feels she's not restricted, she doesn't have to conform and be like other people. She understands, of course, what this business is about, because you'll always have, a code of conduct. How do we Vodacomize people? But I'm a Vodacommer, and a Vodacommer can be like anything or anyone. And so I think inclusion is really, for me, about that successful, I would say, fostering of that culture where it's beyond diversity, but now really making sure that there's enough space for people to express themselves. And we've done a lot of work, I think, for me.
I want to hear that. The
work. I think
the money, because I think there's probably more money here than you're gonna throw at me. Go for it.
No, we don't throw money at everything. We've done work, on things like, what is allyship? So it's training, I suppose, and creating consciousness.
Allyship.
And allyship, I mean, and I think allyship for me is a big one, because I think we all have some kind of privilege that we might not be conscious of, right? So I could start off by saying, I'm a black female, and everybody knows black females are worse off. But I'm also at the most senior level in the organization. I have a seat at the table as an ExCo member. I'm the custodian of the people agenda. I definitely have more privileges and power than the average black woman in the organization.
You got some money to spend.
And I can spend money. And so how do I use that? Exactly. How do I use that to be able to benefit the organization, maybe for people who might not feel that they have a voice, and so sometimes the power or the privilege is the seat at the table that you have. Sometimes it's from just the vantage point that you might have in society. And I think, men supporting women from a gender point of view, creating opportunities, opening doors. And so allyship is one part of it. And I think everyone needs to do their own personal reflection of what is a privilege that I enjoy, that I might take for granted. So it might be safety, sometimes things that you have, other people don't have? How do you create that for other people? And so that's one. We've done training on withstander training, and I love the withstander training because, I think we're familiar with the term of being a bystander. So you just a bystander on the side, but a withstander is actually somebody who can actually participate, and actually you can be, if you're in a conversation and they're like, the Njabulos of the world, one does could be a bystander, or he can actually say, well, actually,
I love it.
Participate, and with the withstander training, I think it was creating consciousness across the organization around, do you actually know how much power you have in many situations, and you just don't realize it, and this is how you could act. And sometimes it's even if it means going to tell Njabulo, because I don't know if I can do everything about it. That's already a withstander, because you saw an injustice, did something about it. It doesn't mean physically being the one to go and solve it, but it's about making sure you're part of the solution. And I think we continue to also just embrace, I think, again, with this culture work that I'm talking about, is inclusivity is also about different ideas, so whether you're part of innovation or a hackathon, not always being traditional in our approach. It requires leadership commitment as well. So for our leaders to be able to, I think you need strong leaders, first of all, who are also open-minded, who are open to diversity, transformation, and empowerment, to be able to have a culture of transformation and empowerment. And I think we're very blessed to have leaders who have been trailblazers, and they've built the organization, since democracy, a leading edge organization. And so you always would need to constantly invite more people into that space who can challenge you, because after a while you become the ones to maintain the things or safeguard it, but how do you actually make sure you still have that culture? But I think also in your practices, whether it's recruiting or hiring practices, and the role modeling, and what you say that you, because every company has things that they say they value, but when it counts, what do you value? And how do you show that you actually value those things?
We're at the top of the hour so quickly. Right, so let's conclude with this. We ask all our guests these two questions. One is for you to give our listeners a challenge. The second one is to recommend a book. One, so that I can add one to my bookshelf, or perhaps, we, your listeners, might read one that you recommend for us.
Sure. My challenge to the listeners, I would say take a stance. Too many people sit on the fence, lukewarm people, unsure. I always encourage people to just have a view. It sounds simple.
I love it.
That can take you in a direction. And if it turns out to be the wrong direction, you take another turn, and you must decide which turn to take at that point.
Yes.
I think for me, we all have a powerful voice. And that saying as well of, even if your voice is shaking, but take a stance, take a view. That's really my challenge to everybody, because we all know inside what that burning thing is telling us, but we're always trying to silence it, which maybe leads me to the second part, which is my favorite book, which is The Alchemist. You probably have it already. Paulo Coelho. And I think it does talk to this, I guess, challenge that I've just posed, because in the book, I guess the main character, Santiago, learns about his personal legend, and for me, again, as per the start of the interview or the podcast or conversation, the best thing I've ever done is to befriend myself, get to know myself. And what I like about Santiago's journey in The Alchemist is really about trusting this vision. They talk about it as the personal legend. Everyone has a personal legend. And whether it was through dreams and through his intuitions, he was always being told this is the next step and the next step. And for me, I think that's been the story of my life. I don't always have the perfect answers. Sometimes I've left jobs or organizations or opportunities at the point where people say, but you're at the height. Why would you come back to South Africa from Europe? Why would you do this and do this and do that? But that trusting your intuition, trusting your personal legend, and for me is powerful. And I think for me, everybody has a personal legend, but you have to lean into it and to trust it. Yeah.
Love it. I kind of borrow 1 minute because this has been running through my head. If I'm trying to befriend myself and I'm seeing the mistakes, the failures, and because those normally pop up quickly, how do I befriend all of that?
Sure. But by continuing to be there for yourself, I think we give a lot of other people a lot of grace. So chances are, if I ask you someone that you care the most about, hopefully you're on the list. But certainly that's a good way to normally test, because if you think of your children or people that you really care about, you give them a chance whether they've done something good or bad, even if you can be mad for a moment. But you come back to the core, and you are gonna be the longest person that you spend time with. And it's quite important that you have a way to forgive yourself, to self-soothe, and to really understand yourself, because that will help you to be able to show up in the best way that you can, and be comfortable that this is my version of best. And best is going to look different for all of us.
Yeah, at different times. Njabulo, thank you so much. Sorry we went over time. That question was just burning in my head. And you can hear they're calling me into the other call. So thank you. We'll clean it up, and then in one of these weeks it will be up in the air.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much, Manda.
Lovely. I'm keen to learn more, but I'll reach out and maybe do a coffee or something like that.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to that. Thanks.
Super.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.